We're joined by a good friend, Democratic Congressman from Pennsylvania, the first admiral ever elected to the United States Congress, and now challenging Senator Arlen Specter in the Democratic primary in Pennsylvania next year, a good friend, Joe Sestak. Hey, Congressman, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Great to be on with you. And, Mike, real honor to be with you.
Thank you, sir.
And he says the same thing about you, Congressman, so there we go. Let's start out with Afghanistan, Congressman. First, I want to ask you about General McChrystal's request and what you think the president ought to do. But before we get to that, the Washington Post reports this morning that the president has already authorized and sent to Afghanistan 13,000 more troops than we knew about, 13,000 on top of the 21,000 he announced in March. Was Congress informed of these additional 13,000 troops?
I was not. And to be honest with you, if that's the case, I'd be quite disappointed that we were not aware of it. So I don't know what the real facts are yet. What
they're saying, and neither do we. We're just reporting the Washington Post, Congressman. But the Pentagon is saying that these are support troops, and the 21,000 were combat troops, and basically that we don't need to know about the support troops.
Mike. Even when Mike was in the Marines, I mean, we know that for every troop that goes forward, you sometimes need 2 or 3 logistical troops. When we were even putting them into Iraq, that tragic misadventure, we always counted how many as a total, and that's just not correct to try to parse it like that.
In other words, you do need the support troops, but we ought to know the total number, not just the...
Absolutely right.
Yeah. All right, so Congressman, General McChrystal says we need another 10 to 40,000 troops. The president is trying to decide what to do. What should he do?
I think go ahead, Mike. You go first, Mike.
No, in your judgment.
No,
I'm asking you, Congressman. Yeah.
All right.
We want to put you on the spot.
First off, this cannot be an open-ended commitment, but I will support a measured increase of troops, approximately 20 to 25, having gone through this report, if the goal is the eradication of the safe haven of al-Qaeda in Pakistan, with a probability, not a certainty, of leaving behind in Afghanistan the probability that al-Qaeda will not return there. And we must have an exit strategy. By that I mean that we have benchmarks that clearly define success and failure. And if we can't get that with a measured increase in troops, we should not do it, because it means the administration cannot measure the efforts of putting more troops there. But it cannot be an open-ended commitment. That's why you need the exit strategy. But I place myself 5 to 6 years from now that if we don't eradicate that safe haven, the planning that they can do undisturbed may end up another 9/11. If we can't be successful in this, then it's got to be a containment strategy. But I believe we should take advantage of this last counterinsurgency strategic offensive to do it, winning the trust somewhat of the people in Afghanistan that we leave behind.
So the focus, you're saying, more on Pakistan,
absolutely,
where al-Qaeda is today, right? Not on so much on building a new government in Afghanistan.
That is correct. See, there's about 20,000 Taliban in Afghanistan. About 70% are there, according to the CIA, mainly for wages. There is 6,000 very al-Qaeda-ized Taliban that we'd like to neutralize. But the sole reason to be there is now because Afghanistan has spiraled so far downward, we could never nation build it. The benefit is not worth the cost. But we cannot leave behind that planning element that has a very unique home. It's not like Somalia. It's not like Sudan. It's very welcome territory for them, not just demographically, but geographically. And I believe closing the door in Afghanistan till Pakistan can really do the eradication with our covert efforts is really the sole objective to remain there.
So you're talking about beheading, essentially, the Taliban, so that you leave Taliban effectively in control in Afghanistan, but not, from your perspective, the more radicalized and dangerous Taliban?
Yes, Mike. It's not perfect, but I was on the ground very early in this conflict. I headed the Navy's anti-terrorism unit and was there for a short period. We were doing it right. We were there having set up an edifice of security from which the real elements that can win the global war of terror, education, financial assistance might have boded a nation left behind, of a society that would be opposed to having being a haven in the future. Today, I think we've got to forget about the central government pretty much of Afghanistan with its corruption and accept that there are autonomous local organizations that if we can at least leave them behind, opposed because of some economic prowess they might garner from some changes, to al-Qaeda coming back, that might be the best we can do.
Congressman, let me ask you a question back to Bill here. You know, you said we sort of have to forget about the Karzai corrupt government. How can we? I mean, they are the government, and the people, from what we've seen, don't trust that government. So how can we accomplish anything when our partner is Hamid Karzai, that the people of Afghanistan don't accept as legitimate?
I think we have to go back to 9/11. What we told the Taliban in Afghanistan after that is throw out al-Qaeda and we will not come in. And so if that really was our primary purpose, I'm not sure we should change it today. And if Kabul cannot handle the situation with enough legitimacy, then I think we go back to the less radical Taliban, I hate to say that, and the warlords to leave some semblance of what, again, not a certainty, but a probability that al-Qaeda may not come back. The cost of trying to do what we could have done, if it wasn't for the tragic misadventure of Iraq, which took our forces and attention away, is too great to do more than that. It's eradicate the al-Qaeda leadership and leave behind the conditions where they might not find another haven.
Well, now, what about the concern that some people have expressed that there are Taliban-like organizations in surrounding countries, and if you leave a Taliban-type organization in charge in Afghanistan, you're going to be effectively supporting the kind of Taliban-esque approach in the entire Southeast Asian region? I
think there's some legitimacy to that. But what I come back to, again, is what Admiral Blair, the head intelligence officer for America now, said about 5-6 months ago. The gravest danger to America today is economic insecurity throughout the world. So, for example, the hundreds of thousands of young Muslim Tajiks that used to work in the oil fields of Russia, thrown out in this recession of their jobs, come home to Tajikistan, no money to get married, don't have a wage. They're attracted to the Tajik warlord who now works for the Taliban. He's Taliban in name, but he gives these people a wage. Are they really Taliban we're leaving behind? Since there's 20,000 Taliban, 70% are there for a wage. They're not real radical ideology. They're the ones that are somewhat, I hate to use this word, acceptable to leave behind. The 6,000 who are just almost like al-Qaeda and truly are radical, those are the ones that we have to still eliminate, neutralize somehow. So they're the ones, according to the CIA, as I sat through the various briefings on my own with them, is that's really what the objective in Afghanistan is. Now, Pakistan is the real dilemma. I think The Economist had it absolutely right 2 years ago where they said Pakistan, most dangerous place in the world.
Yeah.
If we do not continue to close the door as they slowly but surely seem to be turning to a similar counterinsurgency strategy, not because they want to, but because they're so now threatened at their capital, then we won't be ultimately successful because they're the ones that have to take care of the Taliban on the other side, the radical elements, and particularly for us, the al-Qaeda. This, I know it's not a beautiful strategy here. What we're trying to leave is something that's good enough. The cost to do more, I think, is too great, but Pakistan is such a dangerous place. It's not just because of the nuclear weapons there. It's the nuclear knowledge and the 2,000 scientists that have access to radioactive material, plus their knowledge that if we do not help Pakistan eliminate these radical elements, we may, in the global war of terror, years from now, see much graver threats than we would by staying there right now.
Congressman Joe Sestak, our guest here on the Bill Press Show with Mike Farrell here in the studio. Congressman, I want to shift, not that we've exhausted that hardly, or reached agreement on it hardly, but I want to shift quickly to something we have been talking about here and taking some calls on this morning, and that is the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. The President Saturday night at the Human Rights Campaign Fund dinner repeating his pledge that he will sign legislation getting rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell once Congress passes that legislation. Why do we have to wait for Congress to act? to get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell?
The president could sign an executive order.
Yeah, why doesn't he? I mean, isn't that the quick way to do it and get it done?
It is, but I would like to see Congress and the president act before this year is out. In fact, I collected I've got a petition being delivered this evening, over 1,000 signatures asking Congress and the president to act. Here's why I think I want Congress to also act. We have 435 people representing America. To have us, because it is legislation, speak also says this is not who we are. We're better than this. So, yes, the president can act. I was, quite frankly, a little disappointed he didn't give a timetable in his speech. He stopped the cratering of our economy. It's intense, not intensified. We're dealing with health care that we must have, but now is the time to deal with something with our ideals. I'd be very supportive of him acting, but Congress, I want this legislation overturned to have we legislators stand up tall and say how foolish we are and how discriminatory we are. We've got to change this ourselves. So I don't want to just place it on the president. I wanted all of us to stand tall and say, change it, because how can I go to war with these men and women and come home and say they don't have equal rights? How can anyone do that?
Well, that's a big challenge, Congressman, you're taking on. I hope you're successful. And listen, if you can pull that off, you get health care reform and get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell this year, then
you'll be doing something. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely.
Can I just quickly ask you? You're being supportive of President Obama. What about his support for you in running for the Senate?
Well, look, President Obama won because he ran against the establishment, and while he might be on the other side of the equation with his support for Arlen Specter, I don't begrudge him that. He probably had a tough tactical decision to make in wanting 8 months ago to have, or 6 months ago, a safe vote. My take on it is I want to be President Obama's strongest ally, but more than that, we Pennsylvanians will have to live with whoever is our senator for the next 6 years. We can't just worry about an extra vote this year. And in particular with Ed Rendell, the governor supporting Arlen Specter, he's gone in 2010. I want to be a candidate where, as the president once said, worry about principle and politics will follow. We did not get into the White House because of political calculation. We got there because of audacity. And that's why I'm running for the Democratic nomination for senator, because if there's anything that has to be fixed, it's principle triumphing over politics.
And that's why Joe Sestak is going to be a great candidate for Senate in Pennsylvania and someday a great United States senator. Thanks so much, Congressman, for joining us.
And Mike, thank you.
More power to you, Congressman.
Joe Sestak, Mike Farrell, Bill Press.